Hello. Welcome to everyone. Appreciate you all being here today. I'm Bill Mahorny. I'm Chief of Enforcement for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and I'm going to walk you through some folks and some information about the electronic logging devices. Really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us here today. We're very pleased to present and participate in this driver appreciation event here at the ELD, here at the Davis Travel Center. And all of us at FMCSA have tremendous respect and appreciation for the vital and demanding job that truck drivers perform day and night. And we want to make sure that everybody has the correct information about ELDs at this time. As we start, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items with you. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this, so please hold your questions until then. And also, as hopefully you all know, we are streaming today's presentation as a live webcast. And if any of our viewers have questions, please submit them after the session and we will respond directly to you. And LaTanya will talk about how to do that as we move forward. But again, welcome to you all. Appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us here today and get this information from us. Now, our first speaker I want to introduce is Sharon Worthy. She's FMCSA's Director of External Affairs, and as a member of FMCSA's senior executive team, Sharon oversees 3 strategic communication offices: media relations, government affairs, and outreach and education. In this capacity, Sharon provides expert guidance on policy, legislative initiatives, regulatory implementation, and stakeholder and general public relations. She has extensive experience previously holding senior positions at Department of Labor, Homeland Security, Agriculture, and Housing and Urban Development, and has also worked for former Governor of Virginia, McDonnell, and for the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Sharon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Bill. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to be with us today. Before we focus on ELD, which I know is very important to everyone in this room, I'd like to give you a little more context on what we do at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, commonly referred to as FMCSA. And I also want to share with you or discuss a little bit about our roles supporting as well as regulating the trucking industry. FMCSA is the lead government agency responsible for regulation and safety oversight for commercial motor vehicles. FMCSA's mission is to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities involving large trucks and buses. That means working to keep everyone on the roads safe, not the least of which is you, the commercial motor vehicle driver. Skilled and conscientious CMV drivers constantly face risk from those on the road who are less skilled or less dedicated to safety. That's why FMCSA strives to raise the bar for safety across the CMV industry. That's carried out through programs like minimum training requirements for new drivers. We also do a great deal of industry education from our new entrant program, designed to help new operators understand and meet safety requirements, to efforts like our hazardous material programs, which include significant focus on driver education. To achieve our goals, FMCSA partners with industry, safety advocates, and state and local governments. One of more of our recent CMV safety awareness initiatives is called Our Roads, Our Safety, a national campaign and partnership aimed at educating the public about how to drive safely around the nearly 12 million large trucks and buses operating on our nation's roadways. Now, many passenger vehicle drivers do not understand the unique challenges truck and bus drivers face while navigating our roads. I'm sure that many of you are aware that they don't always understand that. Through this partnership, we hope to better educate the public on these challenges as we strive to share the road in a safe manner. FMCSA also focuses resources on identifying CMV drivers and operators who pose the greatest risk and helping them get what they need to safely operate on our nation's roadways. That's the purpose of the Safety Management System, or SMS, and initiatives like the National Drug and Alcohol Testing Clearinghouse. We know that the vast majority of truck and bus companies and the roughly 5 million active CDL holders, including many of you in this room, are professional, safe, and you play by the rules. The industry is your livelihood, so you're not going to do anything to mess up your livelihood. You are committed to safety, take pride in your career, and have families to feed and kids to raise. Safe CMV drivers are critical to our nation, and they keep America's economy running. We have a team of FMCSA representatives here today, both in this session and the FMCSA tent on the site. It's the one where you don't get food. It's all paperwork, all regulating information, but it's still very helpful to you for your business. We are here certainly to help drivers prepare for the ELD rule implementation deadline, which is fast approaching. But we also want to help drivers and operators understand everything that we do as an agency and the many ways that we serve as a resource for the trucking community. I hope you will take a few minutes to visit FMCSA's tent, where staff are ready to answer questions on a variety of programs such as compliance, safety, accountability, or CSA, SMS, commercial driver licensing and testing, medical programs, CMV research and technology, the Our Roads, Our Safety Partnership, and more. Again, thank you all for coming here today. We hope that we are able to provide you with the resources and information that you need to do your job as effectively as possible. And now I'll turn the program back to Bill Mahoney.
Thank you, Sharon. Now to get into what you came for, the ELD. I want to introduce LaTanya Mims, who is my team leader for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Office of Enforcement. LaTanya's been with the FMCSA for over 8 years, starting as a program assistant and becoming a safety investigator, and of course now she is my team leader. She is my right hand and probably the best hire I ever made, let me tell you. But she currently works, for us, and she is the national expert on the electronic logging devices and implementation. You may have seen her before. She, along with a lot of other folks, have spent a lot of time doing sessions like this and providing information to the industry, which we're going to continue to do. But anyway, Ms. Mims has a bachelor's degree in business administration with a minor in entrepreneurial management from California State University and a master's of business administration from North Central University. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce you to LaTanya Mims.
Thanks, Bill. I don't know if I've ever been introduced like that before. Thank you. No pressure. Thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate your interest in this program. Like Bill was saying, my name is LaTanya Mims. I'm a transportation specialist for Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. I'm also in charge of the ELD implementation plan. So today I'm going to go over, first, use this thing right here. There we go. I'll be going over how to assist you all with understanding if you're subject to the ELD rule, and then I'll do a high-level overview on Phase 1 of the ELD rule since we are still currently in Phase 1, and then I'll go into a lot of detail on how to comply with the ELD rule during Phase 2. Are you subject? So for a rule of thumb, if you, the driver, or the motor carrier's operation is required to record a driver's hours of service using a paper log, then you are most likely subject to the ELD rule. Now, there are some exemptions to the ELD rule, and I will go over that in detail during this presentation. Recently, we had some concern with the agriculture exemption and how it applies to the ELD rule. So here I have a high-level overview on how the agriculture exemption works and how to apply the ELD rule to it. So for those operations that transport agricultural commodities from the source of the commodity within a 150 air mile radius, that 150 air mile radius is exempt from the ELD rule. Once that driver has traveled beyond that 150 air mile radius, that's when that driver is required to record their hours of service using a paper log. Now, the driver is subject to recording their hours of service on a paper log, but there are some exemptions before we determine if that driver is required to use an ELD. So I'm going to go into the exemptions of the ELD rule. So short haul operations are exempt from the ELD rule. Drivers that prepare their records of duty status for no more than 8 days in a 30-day period, they're exempt from the ELD rule. Drive-away towaway operations, specifically those drive-away towaway operations where the vehicle being driven is the commodity, or a drive-away towaway operation where the transported commodity is a motorhome or a recreational trailer at which at least one set of the wheels have to be on the surface. And then lastly, commercial motor vehicles that were manufactured before the year 2000 are exempt from the ELD rule. On this particular side, we have some resources available to you. We have some pre-recorded webinars. One of the webinars gives a high-level overview of the ELD rule overall, and then we go into details about the ELD Phase 1, and another pre-recorded webinar on Phase 2, and a technical specification webinar that's more so geared towards our vendors that manufacture and produce ELDs. So we are still in Phase 1 of the ELD rule. Phase 1 started February 16, 2016, and will conclude December 18, 2017. So we are still in Phase 1. And I'm going to talk about Phase 1 a little bit because there are some things that a driver or motor carrier can take advantage of during Phase 1 that they won't be able to do during Phase 2. So on this chart here, I have a comparison of the 3 different devices that are allowed to be used today during Phase 1. You have the AOBRD, which stands for Automatic Onboard Recording Devices, the device installed with logging software application, and the ELD. So the significant difference between the 2 devices is that the device installed with logging software application is not required to be connected to the engine, and is not required to record the driver's hours of service automatically. So now we bring down to the AOBRDs and the ELDs. They're very similar. They both have to be synchronized with the engine. They both have to automatically record the driver's hours of service. The AOBRD has limited technical specifications, where the ELD has a lot of technical specifications that must be adhered to. And lastly, the ELD must be self-certified and registered with FMCSA. Now, the self-certified and registered ELDs can be accessible from the link at the bottom of this page. And this is an example, going back. Forward. Thank you. I want to go forward. Nope. Okay. So we're stuck on this slide for a little bit. You can access a list of self-certified and registered ELDs at the link at the bottom of this page here. Now, one of the advantages that you can take advantage of right now during Phase 1 is that the driver can have an ELD installed in their vehicle and continue to record their hours of service on a paper log right now during Phase 1. We encourage you to take advantage of that so that the driver can be comfortable with the ELD and they can compare what they're recording manually to what's being recorded by the ELD automatically and see the advantages there. That can only happen during Phase 1, which again we are currently still in. Now when the driver gets stopped at roadside, the driver would declare which is their official method of recording their hours of service to that safety official. And then that safety official will take that official method and compare it to the opposite. So for example, if the driver's official method is to record the hours of service manually on that paper log, they'll give that paper log to the safety official. Safety official will use the electronic device as a supporting document. And that can only happen during Phase 1. During Phase 2, the driver that is subject to the ELD rule is going to have to use either an AOBRD or an ELD. So during Phase 1, the hours of service rules will apply. They always will. They will not change. And then the Section 395.15 is specific to AOBRD violations that will be enforced during Phase 1. And then later on in Phase 2, we'll start enforcing the ELD rules and ELD violations. So for example, if you are using an ELD that's not self-certified and registered with FMCSA, today, during Phase 1, you're not in violation. But come December 18, 2017, if your device is not self-certified and registered with FMCSA, you will be in violation. The CVSA out-of-service criteria will not be applied to ELDs until April 2018. Other than that, the hours of service rules will still remain in effect. All right, so now we're going to talk about Phase 2. Phase 2 starts December 18th, 2017, and will end December 16th, 2019. I'm going to go into details on what the difference is. Significant difference is you cannot use a device installed with logging software application during Phase 2. The only options that you can use if you are subject to the ELD rule to record a driver's hours of service is an automatic onboard recording device or an ELD. And at this time, that ELD must be self-certified and registered with FMCSA. And there's a link again, so you can go to that link. Now, those that are in the market of purchasing an ELD, we have a checklist to assist you, and we have it printed out here to my left. This checklist provides some questions for you to ask the vendors to ensure that you're purchasing a compliant device. And this is minimal information. It's not all the information you'll need. So please take advantage of this checklist when you contact a vendor to make sure they're compliant and make sure that they meet your operation needs. Some things you want to take in consideration when you're shopping for your ELD. Some of these ELD providers have a bring your own device platform where you can use a smartphone, and they have an ELD software application that can be installed on that smartphone, and then there's a hardware that's attached to the ECM. So it has like a Bluetooth connectivity with the smartphone. That's one of the platforms that some of these ELD vendors are using. And then we have the regular ELD device that's actually an actual device itself that's mounted to the vehicle. Also, you can have ELD software installed on a tablet. During Phase 2, the ELD must have the capabilities of transferring the ELD data electronically. And there's two options. You have the telematics options and the local option. The telematics option requires that the ELD have internet connectivity, where the local option does not require the ELD to have internet connectivity. This is an example of what the list of self-certified and registered ELDs looks like. That little circle, that red circle, is just an indication that you have access to the user manuals for every vendor. So you can get a feel on whether or not the instructions to that particular ELD device is something that you can work with. If it's too high-tech for you, you can check out another one and maybe it's a little more easier to use. Also on this list, we have contact information for every vendor. So again, please check out our list. I think we have about 80 ELDs currently self-certified and registered with FMCSA. Check out our ELD checklist and ask these vendors these questions. Driver's responsibilities. So during Phase 2, the driver is required to have in their possession a user manual, a data transfer instruction sheet, an ELD malfunction instruction sheet, a supply blank graph grids. Any supporting documents in that driver's possession must be made available to the safety official upon request. Now, while the ELD does automatically record a lot of information, there are some things that the driver has to input manually, such as their off-duty time, the time they're spent in the sleeper berth, and on-duty not driving. Any necessary annotations explaining some type of movement of the vehicle, the driver's location. The driver may have to input their location manually if for whatever reason that can't be automatically populated by the ELD because that area doesn't meet the criteria. And then the commercial motor vehicle power unit being operated by the driver and the trailer number as well as the shipping document, that can be pre-populated by the motor carrier. However, the driver would still have to verify that that information is accurate and true. Now, if the driver works for multiple employers, the driver can produce their previous 7 days at roadside via a couple of methods. They can present their hours of service via paper logs if their other employer is not subject to the ELD rule. A printout from a device installed with logging software application, or a printout from an AOBRD, or the driver can manually edit previous 7 days hours of service into their ELD. Now again, during phase 2, the ELD data must be transferred electronically to the safety official. And these are the two different options, telematics or local. Within those two options, there's two methods. So within the telematics option, the ELD must be able to transfer that data electronically via email and web services. And like I said earlier, that particular option requires internet connectivity by the ELD. So keep that in mind. If you're driving in rural areas where there's limited internet connectivity, you may have some issues with getting the data transferred to the safety official during a roadside inspection. So keep that in mind while you're shopping for your ELD. The other data transfer option is local. Local does not require internet connectivity. The ELD must be able to transfer the data via USB, and this particular USB is provided to the driver from the safety official, and Bluetooth. So these are the two options that the ELD data must be transferred during phase 2 of the ELD rule. Now, if all else fails and the data transfer can't occur, then the safety official will use the display screen of the ELD or a printout from the ELD. I want to emphasize the printout coming from the ELD because the safety official may not accept a printout that's faxed or emailed to them. So while you're shopping for your ELDs, you want to make sure that the actual device itself is either going to display the driver's hours of service on the display screen, or it's actually going to print it out. And there are some printing requirements as far as the size when it comes to the printout from the ELD. Receiving the ELD driver's hours of service via fax or email is at the discretion of the safety official. I would not rely on that feature. A lot of our safety officials won't have access to a fax machine, or they just don't want to receive that information via email. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping for your ELD. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ELD will record the driver's hours of service automatically, and they're going to record it down to the second. There may be some cases where the driver has exceeded their hours of service limitations by 1 minute or 5 minutes. Yes, that is a violation, but for those particular violations, we have the nominal hours of service violation cite. The nominal hours of service violation is a violation that is 15 minutes or less than the hours of service, than exceeding the hours of service limitations. The purpose of the safety official using nominal hours of service violation is to identify patterns of the driver or the motor carrier going over their hours of service. Because if the driver continues to drive over their hours of service for 10 minutes a day, that adds up by the end of the week, and it could be a significant hours of service violation. Now, these nominal hours of service violation have minimal impact on the motor carrier safety management score, but again, we use that to identify patterns. And then any hours of service violation that exceeds 15 minutes, the safety official can cite a normal hours of service violation. ELD malfunctions, like any device, you may experience an ELD malfunction, and the rule took that into consideration. So if a driver is to experience an ELD malfunction, they are to note the malfunction and notify their employer within 24 hours of experiencing that malfunction. If that malfunction hinders the ELD's integrity of recording that driver's hours of service for the previous 7 days, then that driver is required to reconstruct their previous 7 days. And as you may recall earlier in this presentation, that was one of the things that the driver must have in their possession, a blank set of graph grids for this purpose here. The driver will continue to manually record their driver's hours of service using the logbooks until the malfunction has been corrected. Sometimes the malfunction will automatically correct itself, and there's other times where the motor carrier may have to contact the vendor to get it serviced. And we'll go into more details about the motor carrier's responsibilities when the driver reports a malfunction of an ELD. So did I skip a slide? Nope. At the end of the working day, the driver will change their duty status to either off. sleeper berth, or on duty not driving. This can be done physically at the truck or away from the truck. Keep that in mind while you're looking for your ELD device. If there's going to be an occasion where your driver has to step away from the vehicle, it's the end of the day, they have to go work in a warehouse somewhere, they're still on duty driving. But keep in mind when you're looking for a device on if you want the driver to be able to change their duty status while away from the truck, or if you want the driver to have to come back to the truck and change their duty status on the device. The driver is also responsible for adding missing information that wasn't picked up from the ELD. And just like with our paper logs, the driver has to certify that the data is accurate and true at the end of every working day. The driver has to submit their records of duty status or the ELD data every 13 days. And this is just like with paper logs. Drivers can make edits to their ELD data. Once they make their edit, they do have to recertify the data again. The carrier can request edits from the driver. The driver has the right to decline those edits, but keep in mind that any edits that you want made by the driver, you want to have them addressed immediately because those edits could cause an hours of service violation later on. Edits include assigned miles. So for example, if the driver forgot to log into the ELD is going to generate a unidentified driving account, and the motor carrier will have to assign that drive time to that driver. And again, you want to get that done immediately because that driver could not realize that they had been driving for an hour without logging into the ELD, and then when they finally accept that driving time, they've exceeded their hours of service. So now we're going to go over the motor carrier's responsibility during phase 2 of the ELD rule. Record retention has not changed. The motor carrier is still required to maintain the driver's records of duty status for 6 months after they've been generated. This information has to be maintained electronically, but as I mentioned earlier, there may be some cases where the driver has experienced a malfunction and that driver has to record their hours of service manually on a paper log. That paper log has to be maintained for 6 months as well. The motor carrier is responsible for maintaining users lists, such as the driver account. The driver account must include the driver's first and last name and have a unique ELD username, include the driver's license number and the state that issued the driver their license. And the motor carrier is also responsible for maintaining any other user accounts, such as support personnel accounts. The support personnel just has to have the first and last name, does not have to have the driver's license number of the support personnel. And an example of a person that would be a support personnel that would need access to the ELD would be a dispatcher. An owner-operator is going to have 2 accounts, a support personnel account and a driver account. No person can share one account. They all have to have their own unique user accounts. Another example of someone who may need a support personnel account would be a mechanic. Unidentified driving. So as I mentioned earlier, during the driver's responsibilities, the motor carrier may assign unidentified driving to a particular driver. Now, there may be some cases where the motor carrier cannot assign unidentified driving, and it could be because the vehicle was being operated by a mechanic that was not employed by that particular motor carrier. In those cases, that motor carrier has to make an annotation as to why they could not assign those unidentified driving miles, and it was because it was operated by a mechanic that was not employed by the motor carrier. So that is acceptable. The unidentified driving records must be maintained for 6 months by the motor carrier and must be made available to the safety official upon request. Now, while this isn't part of the rule, we strongly encourage companies to develop some type of company policy. One, to address those unidentified driving moments. Make sure your driver understands when they are required to log in and out of the device. That's going to assist with managing those unidentified miles. Make sure your driver understands what resources you are going to use to prove that those unidentified miles belong to that driver. and make sure your driver understands that they can decline the assigned miles to them, but also emphasize to them that if they later realize, oh, those miles did belong to me, that it could result in an hours of service violation. Editing data. The carrier can edit ELD data, but the driver has to accept it. All ELD data can be edited except for drive time. Driving time cannot be shortened unless there is a co-driver involved. So for example, you have driver A and driver B as co-drivers. Driver B failed to log into the device when it was their turn to drive, so now driver A has extra miles on their profile. Well, in that instance, the motor carrier can go back into the ELD and assign those miles driven by driver B to driver B. So this is a quick overview of what's required to be maintained by the motor carrier: list of users, unidentified driving, original ELD data, and paper logs. These things must be maintained by the motor carrier for 6 months. ELD malfunctions. So the driver is required to report a malfunction to a motor carrier within 24 hours of experiencing a malfunction. The motor carrier has 8 days to repair, service, or replace that ELD if that ELD doesn't automatically correct itself. The motor carrier can request an extension to the 8 days. However, that extension request has to come within 5 days of the motor carrier being notified of the malfunction. The request would go to the state division office of where the motor carrier's principal place of business is located. During a safety investigation that takes place at the principal place of business of the motor carrier, the ELD data is going to be transferred electronically as it would be transferred electronically at roadside. The ELD data is going to be transferred electronically prior to the safety official arriving to the motor carrier's principal place of business if the data transfer method used by that ELD is telematics. Now, of course, if the data transfer method is local, then a safety official will physically have to be in the principal place of business in order to receive that data electronically. Okay, so during phase 2, I've mentioned that the motor carrier can use an ELD or an AOBRD. The AOBRD has to be installed and in use by the motor carrier before December 18, 2017. So the motor carrier can purchase and use an AOBRD all the way up until December 17, 2017 and use it until 2019. However, if an AOBRD malfunctions in 2018, it can be replaced only if the fleet size of that motor carrier remains the same. If the motor carrier expands their fleet in 2018 and their majority of their fleet is using an AOBRD, but the motor carrier decides to expand their fleet, that newly purchased or acquired vehicle needs to be installed with an ELD, must be installed with an ELD. That concludes my presentation. Again, I thank you all so much for your interest. If you have any questions, please feel free to email eld@dot.gov. And we also have this very handy web page here that has a lot of pre-recorded webinars, frequently asked questions, and a couple more dates of where we will be for the ELD implementation national tour. So I will be taking questions now. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. Okay, good.
Nope. Who's got the mic? She does. Hopefully you'll have it soon.
We got questions.
We are a sign company. We have installers and one truck driver. The truck driver using the ELDs as they are. Our installers, we send out to Colorado, North Carolina. We're from North Carolina. We go all over the place. How's the ELDs supposed to work for them? When they get to They might be going on a job for a week, 2 weeks at a time. They'll be staying in a hotel. How does the ELDs work for them at that point?
So the drivers or the installers, are you questioning?
Well, the drivers are the installers.
Okay.
They would drive the equipment and the product to a hotel, which may be 3 miles from the job site, so say whatever, Wendy's or whatever it is we're doing at the time. And they'll be driving back and forth from the hotel to the job site the rest of the week and then driving home once the job's completed.
Okay, so driving to and from the job site and the hotel, that's within a 100 air mile radius, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Very close by.
3 miles probably.
So that time that they're operating within that 100 air mile radius, they're not required to use an ELD. But my question is, how far are they driving initially from the terminal to the new site?
It depends. Like I say, we've done work in Colorado, we've done work in California, so.
Okay, so you're driving from Virginia, I'm assuming.
North Carolina, yeah.
I'm sorry, North Carolina, cross country.
Right.
Those hours would have to be recorded
All right.
on a paper log, okay? How often do you do that?
Quite often.
You may be eligible for the 8-day, 30-day period exemption.
Okay.
And what that means is the driver is not required to record their hours of service for no more than 8 days in a 30-day period. So if they exceed that, then they'll be subject to the ELD rule. But if they stay within that 8-day 30, then they can continue to use paper logs.
Okay, so we're going ahead and putting the ELDs on our trucks. We're going to use the ELDs because we stay out so often. But when they get to the hotel, they don't have to log their daily transport back and forth from the hotel to the job site.
Correct. And that's a great situation there because you also have the option of an exempt driver account. So while the driver is exempt, while they're on that site, operating within a 100 air mile radius, that ELD is going to continue to pick up the movement of that vehicle, but you can have the driver log in as an exempt driver so that it won't reflect on the time that's generated from the driver going from Virginia to California or vice versa.
Okay. Where vehicles are, we got crane trucks, bucket trucks, but we also have dualies. Pickup trucks is what we pull our stuff with. A couple of our trucks are used as personal vehicles as well. They, of course, when they leave out, they've got a log on the ELD, but when they're using it as a personal vehicle.
That's a great question. So we are working on guidance specific to personal conveyance. That's what you're describing. And as long as the driver's not dispatched, they're allowed to use personal conveyance. Now, you bring up a good point in the fact that your vehicle has an ELD installed on it. So again, the ELD is going to pick up the movement of that vehicle, but you can identify it as personal conveyance.
Okay.
And it won't go against the driver's hours.
Okay.
Steve from Rose Chauffeur Transportations. We have porter drivers who move the buses frequently. Now, our lot that we park our buses is about 2 miles down. Each time they get on the bus, how should they log on the ELD? Should they just sign off on this one and then just get on the next one, or do? Because we're doing multiple buses a day. They just
So you're talking about
to clean the
Shuffling.
buses and
They're like
few-
shuffling the
Yes.
buses around?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not subject to the ELD rule, but since you have I'm assuming you have ELDs already installed in your
Yes.
vehicles, you can have them log in as an exempt driver.
As an exempt driver.
Yes, that way you won't have to worry about managing unidentified driving, because that could be a lot. I think I heard you say you have about 75 buses. Was that you?
No. We have about close to 50.
Okay, still, that's a lot of unidentified driving that you'd have to manage. So you can set up exempt driver accounts for them to log in, so it will keep track of the shuffling of your vehicles.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Commodore Hall, and I'm with ISRI. My question is in regards to the paper logs that you referenced. You mentioned that during Phase 2, both are required, ELDs and paper logs, or is it just ELDs, and in the event that that ELD breaks down, then the driver is required to provide paper logs? Is that
That's a good, yes. So what I was saying was during phase 2, the driver is required to have a user manual, instruction manual, a malfunction sheet manual, and a supply of blank graph grids in their possession during phase 2.
Blank.
Blank.
Okay.
Blank. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, those blank graph grids are to be used when the driver has experienced an ELD malfunction that does not allow them to present their previous 7 days to a safety official. The driver is going to use those blank graph grids to reconstruct their previous 7 days, and they're going to continue to record their hours of service manually until their ELD has been serviced.
Okay, next question would be, in the event that a motor carrier is audited by the DOT in a compliance review, and prior to that inspector arriving at the motor carrier site, let's say, for example, that motor carrier has a couple hundred drivers, would that inspector be reviewing only a percentage? Are they still going to review just a percentage? Or would they be reviewing logs for 100 drivers for 6 months?
That's a great question. We're still sticking with our sample size when we do compliance reviews.
Okay, and that's right around 20%, 30%?
It's been a long time since I've done a safety investigation. Greg, do you know what's the sample size?
None of that will change.
Varies based on the number of drivers.
Right.
So 100 drivers sample size is
I think it's 20%.
25?
That will not change.
Okay,
That won't change.
okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
I know y'all gotta have more questions.
Okay.
Well,
Shall we conclude?
any other questions? One last grouping? Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys again. Really appreciate your time. And Bill, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, LaTanya. Appreciate that. You can see why she's a national expert here, again, we're going to be here for the next couple days, outside, not only about ELDs, LaTanya and I are here to talk about ELDs, but we've got folks over there that can talk about CDL. We've got folks who can talk about the safety measurement system, all those kind of things. We want to make it as worthwhile as possible for you all here today. I want to thank also the Virginia State Police. They're here as well to help out and answer questions. Definitely our division office, here out of our Richmond folks and various other points within the state. But we're all going to be here for the next couple days, and we're happy to answer any questions you've got. As LaTanya also said, please do take advantage of our website. We have lots of information up there. I saw a lot of folks, taking images of this. I believe this presentation, or one very similar to it, is already up on the website. So feel free to use that. We have all kinds of training materials up there. Please take advantage of them. Contact us, send your questions. We have several people answering these questions, and we know we're going to get more and more, as we get closer to the deadline. But we want to make sure that everybody understands the rule. There's so much weird information going on out there. We just want to make sure everybody knows what the reality of the situation is, and we're here to do what we can to make sure that you get the information you need to comply with that. But one last shot, anybody have any questions here in the room? Or like I said, we're going to go right outside. So if you think of something here in the next few minutes or before 5 o'clock tomorrow, we'll be here. We'll be here to answer. Any other questions or thoughts? Sharon or anyone else? Okay, and again, please feel free. Use our website. Contact us. We're here to help. We're here to provide you with whatever we possibly can. But thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
See, now we already asked you to have questions, sir.
Just didn't want to be on camera for it.